Welcome, everybody. It is about 12:01, so we are going to get started. This is the first webinar in our in Chesapeake Stormwater Network's 2023 summer webinar series, the first of 4. So thank you all for attending today. We are going to be hearing Allie Jen speak on her BUBBAs award-winning project, Wattles and Small Changes, Big Impact, Wattles and More. And this is a project that Allie submitted and won for the Best Residential BMP category in the BUBBAs, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But we wanted to invite Allie to speak because we were very impressed by both the journey of her project, the scale, and the way in which she used the resources at hand, used her community, and has also shared a lot of the knowledge and education gained in this landscaping project. So very briefly, many of you have probably attended a CSN webinar or some sort of webinar in the past. So just a few things to know before we continue. This webinar will be recorded and the recording will be posted on our website just in a couple days. Also, sorry, I should introduce myself, by the way. My name is Michelle and I'm the Stormwater Coordinator with Chesapeake Stormwater Network. So I will be posting this recording within the next couple of days, as well as some of the resources that Allie Jen will share with us in her presentation. We will also have poll questions today, just one question, and you'll know when it comes up. And when it does, all you have to do is click on your screen. We also will have an opportunity for questions and comments. For questions, it's best, you could put them in the chat, but it's a little easier for us to keep track of them if they're in the Q&A. And which you can find in the bottom of your screen. And feel free to use the chat for comments, or if you want to share resources or anything like that, you can utilize both. And last, we appreciate your feedback. There'll be a very brief survey that we will share with you at the end of the webinar today. And we definitely look at those comments and suggestions and appreciate you filling out the survey. It should take you less than a couple minutes. I think there's 5 questions. For those who may or may not be familiar with Chesapeake Stormwater Network, we are an organization with about 11,000 members all across the Bay watershed. And we exist to connect different stormwater practitioners, residents, and people who live in the watershed to share education and resources, to share webinars, and also to celebrate all of the progress and the best practices around the Chesapeake Bay. And we do that through our BUBBAs Awards, we do that through stormwater conferences, and through our newsletter. So joining the network, everything is free. And by joining the network, you will get a monthly stormwater newsletter with all of our resources in it. And upcoming at Chesapeake Stormwater Network, just some events for you to be aware of. We have our CUSP program coming up pretty soon. The registration will open in just a couple weeks. CUSP stands for Chesapeake Urban Stormwater Professionals. And this is a free professional training program that includes modules on many different topics, ranging from watershed restoration and sort of the science basics to stormwater management and MS4 permits. So this is the second iteration, the second cohort of this program, and it's anyone can take it, and it's a great program for students and folks who are early in their stormwater careers. And the program is going to run from September 6th to October 26th, but it's a fairly flexible program, so you'll actually have longer than that time period to complete the date or to complete the program. You'll have to complete it by December 15th in order to get the certificate, but you can also try out the program, watch the resources and engage in the resources, and come back to it later on if these dates aren't, if you're not quite able to complete it in time. And a few of the upcoming webinars that we have this summer, this is the first one, like I said, and then we have about one a week for the next couple weeks. All are very different in topics, and all will offer a lot of different and interesting information. And we definitely recommend that you go ahead and register for those. And they also all will be recorded. So if you're not able to attend live, they will be available for you on the website. So, like I said, Ali Jen was the winner of our Best Residential BMP category for our BUBBAs Award. So if you are not aware of what our BUBBAs Awards are, they stand for Best Urban BMP, Best Management Practices in the Chesapeake Bay. The award recognizes the best practices and programs across the watershed. We hold the awards every 2 years, and they are meant to celebrate and disseminate information of the innovators in the watershed doing stormwater management practices, provide tools for education and disseminate this information, and also engage our very large, very active network. And the pictures that you're seeing to the left is a picture from Ali Jen's project. And we also have a few other pictures from the projects that were winners this year. So I'm going to introduce Ali Jen and her presentation. Ali, we were very impressed with her story and how she became interested in this project with Wattles. It all started during COVID, and she needed something to do with her son over the summer in 2020 because the summer camps were not open. So she and her son enrolled in a few horticultural classes at the local community college, CCBC, and Ali Jen fell down the rabbit hole of sustainable horticulture. She ended up taking multiple classes and workshops, both at CCBC and at the Gunpowder Valley Conservancy. And this project came about through assignments that she had in classes. She decided that she wanted to apply what she was learning and apply what she was having to do for her classes in real life. So she took the case study for her assignment and applied it out in the world and out into her backyard. And that is the project that she is going to be presenting today. Before we get started, we are going to test out our poll feature and do a quick poll of what our familiarity is with wattles. So you should see the poll on your screen. Okay, nice. So we have almost everyone who answered. And of our familiarity with wattles, we have 5 of us who consider themselves wattle experts. That's awesome. 2 who think that ducks do it, so not super sure exactly what a wattle is. Many who it sounds familiar, but not too sure. We had 16 people say that, and 6 people who said no clue, and I'm here to learn. That is perfect. I'm here to learn as well. All right, so we'll exit the poll and let me make sure your whole, there we go. All right, Ali, when you are ready, you can come off of mute and take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. So this is a photo of some of my wattles. As you may know, they're very rustic looking. And a wattle is what I think of a woven fence method. Sort of think of vertical basket weaving, if you will. Traditionally, wattles were used in Britain and made out of willow. So the wattles were fences and gates and were very uniform looking. But since I don't have access to a vast amount of willow, I've been able to use materials at hand. A lot of hardwood, oak, maple, ash, hickory, and some cedar, some cherry, what's really in my yard as well that falls down from trees. And so they're very rustic looking. And as Michelle said, this project stemmed from a course in sustainable horticulture where I had to do a site analysis and sustainable concept plan. Next slide. And from that, I decided afterwards to really just put it into practice. And we have about 4 acres here in northern Baltimore County, near the Pennsylvania line. And it's wooded, a lot of shade. Some places are deep shade. And I divided our property into 2 sections, basically above anything from the road, the top of the driveway, down to the house, and then for the back of the house down to the road and stream below. And I've pretty much finished with the first phase of building and installing lots and lots of wattles from the top of the driveway down to the house, and am starting on, made a little bit of headway in terms of phase 2. Next slide, please. So this kind of gives you a sense of the geography. The little blue dot is my house, and the red veins lines are signify the impaired waterways around my house. And there, at the bottom of our property, there is a stream that feeds into the Gunpowder River that eventually makes its way down into the Chesapeake Bay. And I wanted to do my part in terms of slowing down the runoff down our driveway into the stream, because I'm concerned about the stormwater management and all the erosion. So the site analysis of this assignment spanned looking at the soil, looking at the sun patterns, the vegetation, looking at the drainage, the wildlife habitat, and the steep topography where my house is sited. Next slide, please. So this is the first picture on the left is sort of at the top of the driveway. We're off of the road down a panhandle driveway. The house is built within a hillside, and we have a very steep driveway. It kind of goes down and curves right in front of our driveway. And there's about a 20 to 30% slope. And before we bought the house a number of years ago, I didn't know anything about stormwater management. And it was only until I took these horticulture classes that I began to learn about it. And calculating the amount of runoff from the panhandle and the driveway and the other impervious surfaces, there's several thousand gallons of runoff. And during a very heavy rainstorm, that's a lot of water. So the assignment was to come up with a plan of how to manage it. And then you can see the second picture of, we just have a small amount of lawn, but that's near the west part of the driveway, and the water just rushes down the driveway and then goes across the lawn, and it kind of pools in a depression area by that large tree and where a rain garden now sits. Next slide, please. So backing up, so this is kind of as you're going down a driveway, before it curves, you hit a little speed bump. To the right of the speed bump, there is a swale, which isn't all that effective, quite frankly. And I wanted to make it more effective. And then above the swale is a fairly steep slope. And this area where you see is covered in pine needles in this photo, but it's about 1150 square feet in area. And we'll come back I'll come back to talk about this particular slope area later on. Next slide, please. So importantly, in looking at this project, we were asked to identify opportunities and constraints in terms of, and my goal was to manage both the runoff and restore a healthier woodland ecosystem. And the site is mostly wooded. As I said, we already had some ferns, some native plantings and trees, and I wanted to reuse materials that we already had and build upon our composting and install another rain barrel, which I have done, and also to amend the soil. The constraints on this site are significant, given the steep slope and the amount of runoff and erosion issues. But at the same time, there's a really good well, and there have been a lot of invasives, but we've been able to take out a lot of the invasive plants. And it's a constant job, but it could have been far worse. So next slide, please. So this is, as many of you know, hard work. And I have spent many, many hours. I was out in the woods and in really high humidity with all these cicadas falling on my hat and all around me. And the sound was just deafening as I was building wattles. I mean, it was just, I never thought that I would be hauling loads and loads of logs and branches, learning how to use a chainsaw and whatnot. So I came up with a few ideas that in terms of inspiration, and these really were the lens for providing inspiration. So in those moments of wondering, what kind of crazy person is doing this? Can I stop? Is this all worth it? Coming back to the importance of sustainability, that I am a steward of this land, and that I wanted to install things and plants that were both beautiful and had function. Next slide, please. So after doing the site analysis, I developed a sustainable concept plan, and I'll share with you the 3 goals that I identified as part of that plan. And this is a photo of one of my early wattles. I realize it doesn't look like much, but there's at the base, there is a log, and I would try to use large logs as a foundation and then build up from there in terms of weaving branches above, sort of to make a vertical fence, if you will. My son taught me how to whittle stakes from branches, and we've used hundreds, countless numbers of stakes. I did try using initially some store-bought stakes, but they didn't look right. They kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. So I went back to just using all natural materials. And every now and then I might have to pound in a stake. But for the most part, these wattles have held up now since March of 2021, when I first built my first wattle. And sometimes I go walking along the wattles and I'll pick up branches that are strewn on the floor, on the ground, and drop them back into the wattles, and the leaves and other debris fall into the wattles as well. So next slide, please. So in addition to my horticulture classes at the community college, I also took a conservation garden workshop that was run by Patricia Siglia at Gunpowder Valley Conservancy. And that really dovetailed very nicely with my horticulture classes. And it was a one-day workshop. And I asked her afterwards to come out to my home and for a consult. And I gave her my rough draft of my site analysis and asked her for some help if she had any suggestions as to my design plan. And she suggested that I install wattles, and brought me a book and showed me a picture of a wattle. And, and then I taught myself how to build them. And this is one of her photographs that she shared with me of one of her works, because I thought it would be helpful for people to see more clearly the terracing that the wattles can provide, and the plantings, because it's a little harder to see the plantings in my wattles so markedly because of all the other plants that are in the woods. But here there's a lot of, mulch, and you can see the woody shrubs that have been planted as a living wattle. So and they really, I discovered that starting in March of 2021, when we installed the first wattles, and with the spring rains, it had a very quick and effect in terms of slowing down the runoff, and plants and wildflowers began to emerge. Next slide, please. The second goal of my concept plan was to install a series of swales and berms. And I've done that in the front lawn and in the backyard, beginning to do that more and more. And my plan is, and part of the second phase, is to install mostly swales and berms in the rear section of our yard where I don't have road access. And so I would use a mixture of compost or soil that I dug out from the swales, as well as wood chips for the swale and cardboard, and then plant the berm with native woody shrubs and other plants. And that too has really helped to slow down the water in various areas of our yard. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, at the bottom of, or near the bottom of our lawn, what little is left of it, there was an area that during a very, very heavy rain, the water would pool and the ground would become very soggy. And I could have just planted in that area water-loving plants, but I decided that I wanted to learn how to install a rain garden. And I didn't realize it was going to be so much work, but it has been, I learned a lot in doing that. It's 16 by 20. And we dug it out very carefully because there are trees nearby. And it goes about 18 inches down. My son helped me hand mix the bioretention mixture of sand, compost, and topsoil. So I can attest that there's 3,000 pounds of sand in my rain garden. And that was in the fall. I just finished right around Thanksgiving in 2021. And I was so exhausted, I just mulched it with pine needles and let it rest until the following year summer, and then planted it. And I just, as a side note here, as part of there have been many, many people who have been incredibly helpful to me in doing this work. And without them, this work would not have been possible. Lisa Duff, our neighbor and friend, who lent me the use of her farm truck and to haul countless, I lost count, but at least like 70 truckloads of a full-size truck of logs and branches. People who have let me gather up their pine needles, people who have given me plants, and I've developed a close relationship with Stan Kohler of Kohler Nursery, who has really helped me choose wisely my plant. And it's harder in the shade. So this rain garden is in the shade, and I have a dog hobble, an inkberry, and Arctic fire shrub. And it's been a really wonderful relationship to have, to be working closely with somebody who loves native plants so much and is so knowledgeable. And after installing the rain garden, I decided to build a series of check dams leading up or down to the rain garden, using logs. And instead of planting the space in between, like I did in other check dams on the property, I decided to use stone that I had harvested in making my wattles, because inevitably when I would be building a wattle, I would hit rock or a stone. And so I didn't know what else to do with these rocks. So they became part of the check dam. Next slide, please. So these are just some photos. In the top upper left are some stakes that my son made. There's the farm truck with a load of wood. At various times for many months, our driveway, both sides, were just piled high with logs and branches that I found from neighbors. And it was in the fall of 2020 that I just woke up one morning and I heard the sound of a chipper, and it was drizzling. And I went over to my neighbor's house just a few doors down and asked for all the branches that, instead of having them go into the chipper. And he'd cut down several maple and oak trees. And I did not know how heavy those things were, that wood was going to be. I didn't know how to use a chainsaw at that time, and it took about 14 truckloads to bring that wood over to my house. But they became part of the wattles that you now see that are now still in my yard. Next slide, please. So wattles can look differently depending on the time of year. You can see their definition in the fall with the leaf litter. You can see how in the spring, when the ferns and the woody shrubs emerge, how they get sort of covered up. Sometimes ferns grow among and in between the wattles, and they also get covered in the snow. But once they are built, as I said, they have required very little maintenance, and which is a good thing. And the woody shrubs that I've planted behind the wattles will eventually become a living wattle to help slow down the water once these logs and branches decompose. Next slide. So this is the slope, and this is where I began. In the fall of 2020, after taking the organic gardening class, I was just hooked. And so I took soils, and I learned how to take soil samples, and this slope, 1150 square feet in area, had been for years covered with stiltgrass. And I did a soil test, and it was in dire need of organic matter. And so I set about weeding it for the umpteenth time and amending it with compost and mycorrhizae. and then mulching it with pine needles and planting it with native woody shrubs. And I also installed fascines and planted above the fascines to help slow down the water on one section of the slope. And it has made a huge difference. And it's really very gratifying to see these plants grow and fill in. And I keep finding tree saplings that want to make their home on the slope. And I tested the soil a year later and it was loam. And that was really, really gratifying. And no chemicals were used in getting rid of the stilt grass. And it has not returned. Next slide, please. So this is the picture, a picture of our backyard and off the deck. And as you can see, it's not a healthy woodland area. There are trees. There are a few understory trees like the dogwood, but for the most part, there's a lot of barberry, a lot of just brown leaf litter. And that's really also what the area above where I built the wattles looked like before I installed the wattles. And so it's not healthy. And my goal is to install a riparian buffer at the bottom of our property that is very near to a stream that feeds into the Chesapeake Bay, or the Gunpowder River rather, and to continue efforts to amend the soil and safeguard plantings from deer, and to continue to remove invasive plants. Next slide, please. So as many of you know about the secondary succession, and I have an oak-hickory forest. Many of the trees, like the swamp oaks that I have in my yard, are old, but notably, I don't have any beech trees. And I do have some saplings that are trying to grow, and I suspect that I don't have any full-grown beech trees because of the deer and invasive plants, and I'm trying to rectify that through my efforts. Next slide, please. In my courses, I've had a chance to do a lot of reading about and think deeper about this project, which has led me to learn about forest fragmentation and FIDs, the forest interior dwelling songbirds, and how they are increasingly declining in population, and to see what, if any, part I can have in providing a healthier woodland ecosystem, and perhaps knit together with other areas so that these songbirds can have habitat to live and raise their young and find food. Next slide, please. So in my readings, this is what I have come up with, that I knew that deer had an adverse effect on plants, especially native plants, but I didn't really know about the interplay that they have with invasive plants. And I would also like to add the importance of stormwater management, that you can't have one without the other, that to achieve these goals of slowing down the runoff, installing native plants, we need to deal with all three of these things all at the same time. Next slide, please. In my research, I was just stunned to learn about how devastating the deer can have on our forests and native plantings. It's not that they just eat things and kill off saplings, but the cumulative effect is just, can be overwhelming. Next slide, please. Here's a list of invasive plants that I have found in our yard. Fortunately, I have not found any thistles, but I have taken out truckloads of honeysuckle, truckloads of the multiflora rose, which I think the thorns are just the nastiest and very hard to get rid of, those splinters. And how the deer and the invasive plants work together to make in an environment that is inhospitable for native plants and trees. Next slide, please. So in my readings of looking at how deer and invasive plants work together in terms of furthering the degradation of the soil, making it hard for wildlife and for birds to find food and habitat, to making it hard for native plants and shrubs and trees to grow. It's quite daunting. Next slide, please. I've come across this National Park Service report. It's from March of 2023. And I think it's very instructive because for me, and that what the National Park Service is trying to do, they've been running this study for the past 12 years, and I think 39 national parks from Maine down to Virginia, to try to nurture the next set of trees for succession. And it's very slow going. And as you can see, the difference from 2009 and 2022, there's not that much difference. And it was just shocking to me. Next slide, please. So this recent study revealed that in 70% of these national parks, they're classified as imminent failure or probable failure, and then some forest loss is already underway. And we're losing our forests. And that the most important predictors are the overabundant deer and the invasive plants. And I think that this is instructive to be as a lesson, like for me, and that my 4 acres is just a little tiny microcosm of this. And that I hope to do my part, if possible, in trying to address these issues. Next slide, please. And I've learned that small changes can make a huge difference. And in miraculous and wondrous ways, that the wattles have meant less weeds, They've meant my woody shrubs have been able to get a drink. And there have been new birds like the pileated woodpecker and many other birds that you don't often see. I've been seeing a number of times the return and discovery of wildflowers that I had not seen growing in my yard before. So it's truly, truly amazing what can happen in a short amount of time. Next slide, please. So these are some of the lessons that I personally have learned. I have had the luxury of being able to walk out my door and really, really look at the land through different seasons, different times of the day, tracking the sun, noticing the wind, going out in the rain, taking pictures or video of the water running down my driveway, identifying both the challenges and the opportunities, not just one or the other, making a wish list. And that when I made my sustainable concept design plan, I made a wish list. And I can tell you that I accomplished each and every single one of them. And I've made a new wish list, starting small, starting in one place. So for me, that was starting at the slope, that I wanted to see if I could amend the soil in that one place before I started anywhere else. And rather than, being pulled in all different kinds of directions, taking on one project at a time, taking lots of photos, keeping a logbook, really taking the time to amend the soil, letting it rest before I planted, delving into the work. It's become my newest obsession, I'm afraid, being creative, using natural materials, and what I have, and it being truly very, very grateful for all the help and support that I have received. Next slide, please. So for the past year, I've been volunteering over at Cylburn Arboretum in Baltimore City. And I was asked to install a wattle, and then it became 2 wattles at Cylburn to help address some of the runoff from the driveway in front of the mansion that was rushing down the turf. And there's a link there at the top with an article that it's a very short article, but it has a few pictures at the Cylburn website of the wattle, and 3 of my classmates from the community college helped out with this project. For all of us combined, it was about 100 hours. We used the wood and the logs and the branches that were pruned during that winter. And in February of this past year, I taught them how to wattle. And other people who were not able to wattle, brought us materials, came in, offered, words of encouragement, helped bring us, gather logs and sticks and yes. So if you go to Cylburn, you can see the 2 wattles. They have magnolia logs at the base, and we installed them like the other wattles I've done on the contour line, so that when the water rushes down, it will basically break off and go to the side rather than creating rivulets. And they're about 2.5 feet tall and very, very thick. So we wanted them to be substantial and for them to withstand the kick and the push test. And they were a lot of fun to build. And it's been really nice that since then, since teaching some of my friends to wattle, they've sent me pictures of wattles that they've installed around their garden or at their workplace or at their home. And it's really, really gratifying to see that the wattle fever, if you will, or wattle mania can be catching. Next slide, please. This is a very short list of books and some articles that might be helpful if you're interested in further reading. I've read broadly about a number of related topics. Next slide, please. This is by far one of my favorite quotes. That ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. And I truly believe that whatever I can do from my little part, I strive to do, to mend, if possible. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Allie. That was fantastic and so detailed and with great photos and everything. So Allie provided her contact information, and we are going to jump into our Q&A in just a second, but also wanted to share with you first our survey for this presentation. I think David's also going to drop the link in the chat, but if anyone wants to pull this up, they can do it now or pull it to the side while we jump into our Q&A. I'll leave this link up for just a second. You can't click on it, unfortunately, but you can copy and type it in.
All right. This is David here at CSN. I didn't introduce myself earlier, but I've been keeping an eye on the Q&A as we've been going through things today. So, Allie, we have a couple questions here for you, some clarification and some folks kind of looking for a little bit more information.
Okay.
So the first is just sort of a question of clarification. I think you used both of these terms kind of interchangeably. Is a wattle the same as a fascine as you're doing your design? Do they essentially look and work the same, or do you have something that you sort of use to differentiate the terms?
They're slightly different. So a wattle tends to be thicker and have there's no set width or height per se, and plantings are usually done behind the wattle. If you're sort of looking at the wattle, it's gonna be right in front of you, and then you plant, and then there's the wattle, and then there's the space that's above. With a fascine, it's more of branches, and it's on a steeper slope. There was a section of my slope that is even a little bit too steep for the fascines, so it just has plantings instead. But on the part that's closest to the driveway, which I would say maybe if a rough guess, maybe a 20% slope, maybe 15 to 20%. I kind of placed fascines, not in a straight line, but think of like, those pinball machines where you have like a fascine here, and then off to the side, you have another fascine. And those are like a series of 3 to 4 thicker branches that are long. They're also staked, but I plant them, the woody shrubs above. So think of it like the water is coming down the slope, and it hits the plant first, and then the fascine, and then the space, if that helps.
Very helpful, thank you. The next kind of two questions are about the scope and scale of the project. How long it took you to kind of go from start to finish, and if you did it in phases, and then roughly kind of how much acreage is involved in the project.
Well, really, I started gathering wood in like December, the winter of December, January, February of December of 2020 and January and February of 2021. But it was not until March of 2021 when my son, who was still in high school, had his spring break. And so I said, well, guess what? What we're going to do for your spring break? We're going to teach ourselves to build wattles. And so that's what we did. We bought a chainsaw, and we learned how to use it. And so roughly now, I would say like 90% of the upper 2 acres are wattled. I did an original, and it took me about 3 months every day working on wattles that were on the steepest side of the slope, and you started at the top because that's where the water hits first, and you work your way down. So I did from the top of the driveway on the north side all the way down to my swale and slope. And that probably took me about 3 to 5 months, I think. I think I got half of it, most of it done in 3 months.
Great. Yeah, thanks. The next question is sort of about the design. Lori was asking if you bury the base of the wattle in the soil a little bit so that the water doesn't pass directly underneath of the wattle, sort of if you have to anchor it that way.
No, I don't bury it. So to clarify, what I do is I use an A-frame level, and I mark the contour line first, because if you don't install the wattle along the contour line, you're going to get rivulets. And so I just once I flag it, and then I set the logs along that contour line. And so I don't need to bury it. The stakes do get buried, and that can vary on the stake. I mean, some stakes go in the ground for, I don't know, maybe 3 inches. Some are deeper, because some of my stakes are pretty substantial. So they might go in for like 5 or 6 inches down into the ground. And so they help hold the logs in place, and they also hold the upper part of the wattle in place as well. And at Cylburn, what we did was we trimmed all the tops of the stakes so they would all be uniform. But as you can see from the photos of mine, I don't bother to do that for my wattles. I just whittle the stakes, I pound them in, and if some are taller than others, that's fine. Does that help?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. I've got 2 more for you. One of which is, someone, Beth mentioned, if there are any concerns about potential barriers of natural movement to some really small animals in the area. Is that something that you thought about or considered? Obviously, larger animals can just kind of go around them, but, are there any habitat concerns, or is it mostly just benefits from that standpoint?
Well, when I built the wattles, the thing about it is that there's no set way to decide where to place the wattles. So it really depends on the topography. So sometimes my wattles are very close together. Some of my wattles are farther apart. And I would look at the trees. I would build my wattles along the trees. So, because I was careful to kind of build around them or not around them, depending on the trees. And so I did notice that birds and chipmunks would be finding habitat. I saw a lot of insects, a lot more insects. I saw ferns and wildflowers growing amongst some of my wattles. So I think while I tried to be careful about where I placed them, I think that uh, in the end, they provide habitat. And and if a small little animal could go around it, because they're not all connected, because they might just go around all the way to the other end of the wattle.
Great. And the last question for you is sort of if you have a specification or sort of a one-page design sheet that you used or you worked off of for this project, maybe that we might be able to share or make available to folks that joined today.
A design sheet.
So as you were kind of working through the project and doing your installation, did you have sort of a source material or design, or were you kind of figuring it out, as you went along?
I I basically figured it out as I went along, because to be honest, I didn't know what I was doing when I started. And I was just teaching myself how to build a wattle. And eventually I got better at building a wattle. The wattles that I've built later on are more substantial, and each one is different. And depending on what wood and the terrain that I had available. So it really is, I think, very flexible. I think it's more of being able to, I think that watching my classmates learn how to wattle, I gave them very few instructions. I showed them how to do it, how I would do it. I gave them some guiding principles. I gave them, it has to be survive the kick test, the push test. They had to get down on their knees and look up to see if they filled in all the cracks. They told me that it required a lot of patience, and that another classmate, I told that, she had to trust herself, because there isn't one way to wattle, or at least in my view, that, when you looked at the wattle at Cylburn, that you can see, if you look really, really closely, you can see, like, people had different sections that they had, but they're slightly different, but it all works together. And so I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it definitely does. I can say that, there are a handful of examples for the stormwater design folks on the line, that can speak a little bit to wattles in an erosion and sediment control context. They're a little bit different than sort of the design that you've taken, but I think that sort of speaks to your point that there are different ways to do it and accomplish a lot of the same objectives. I can throw a link in the chat here for a design spec that they use out in Washington State. Again, slightly different than what Allie has done on her site, but for folks that are kind of interested in seeing, what that looks like, take a look at that. All right, that's all of the questions that we had. Michelle, do you want to wrap us up here?
Sure. Thank you everyone so much for attending, and thank you to Allie Jen for such a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone. And this webinar recording will be on the website if anyone would like to share it with anyone, and as well as a couple of resources to go along with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.